Somalian pirates robbed us for $1 billion.
According to a new bombshell report from the New York Times, Somalian migrants in Minnesota have defrauded nearly $1 billion in taxpayer-funded benefits under Democrat Governor Walz's leadership.
This was the biggest COVID scam in American history.
A nonprofit and its affiliates with these Somali migrants claim to have fed tens of thousands of American children during the pandemic. They were reimbursed for those meals by taxpayers. However, federal prosecutors found that almost all of those meals were never even delivered to hungry children. In fact, those organizations' leaders spent the money on houses, luxury cars, and real estate in Turkey and Kenya.
Somalis were stealing your money right under Tim Walz's nose. And this didn't come out of the blue. There were red flags and whistleblowers, but the Somalis played the race card. They said they'd sue and go to the press if the funds didn't come through. This was right after the Floyd riots. Walz didn't want the racial heat. Minnesota Democrats also didn't want to tick off one of their most powerful voting blocs. We've been importing thousands of Somalians into Minnesota for decades, and they've been feasting on Minnesota's welfare programs. Now they're political heavyweights. So when government whistleblowers told Walz what was happening, he tried shutting them up, they say. Tim Walz systematically retaliated against whistleblowers using monitoring, threats, repression, and did his best to discredit fraud reports. So Walz had a COVID snitch line, but when someone snitched on the Somalis, he hung up the phone. This should have been the biggest story of the election. Kamala's VP pick let his state get fleeced. Walz even gave one of the Somalis a trophy before she was arrested, the Outstanding Refugee Award. That's enough to sink a campaign, but Kamala still picked him. Government whistleblowers say they warned Kamala and the DNC about it also. Now, Tim Walz says, don't blame the Somalis.
It's not just Somalis. Minnesota is a generous state. Minnesota is a prosperous state, a well-run state. We're AAA bond rated, but that attracts criminals.
Getting scammed isn't generous. It's stupid. And if Somalians are behind it, we're going to blame them.
We do not blame the lawlessness of an individual on a whole community.
That's not what Elon said about white Republicans. She thinks we should all be locked up over J6. We're not giving Somalis a pass just because they're black. We're just sick of getting ripped off.
Do you stand by that claim of calling Tim Walz?
Yeah, I think there's something wrong with him. Absolutely, sure.
Christopher Rufo is a senior fellow at the Manhattan Institute. How bad was this scam?
Well, it's even worse than the current reports indicate. It's not just a single billion, but sources in Minnesota tell me it's multiple billions of dollars that have been stolen by Somali migrants, predominantly in Minneapolis. They were doing things like faking autism diagnoses, faking autism treatment plans, opening up fraudulent autism centers, and then bilking hundreds of millions of dollars from taxpayers. This is the biggest systematic fraud scandal, and it's not just a few isolated individuals. I think we're looking at hundreds of Somali families and really widespread recognition within the Somali community.
And so this fraud was raised multiple times by multiple people, and the Democrats in charge in Walz's office did nothing?
That's right. Bits and pieces of the story have been leaking out for almost 10 years now. And Minnesota political leaders say that the Somali community is so powerful. It uses intimidation. It threatens people with accusations of racism. That at one point, the Minnesota state government had shut down some of this funding. But upon threats from the community, they reopened it without any investigation, any penalty. And this is what happens when you get Minnesota nice. That mixes with a Somali community that seems to think it could commit fraud with impunity. This is not a good mix, and it just shows you that, look, not all cultures are equal, and some cultural systems are fundamentally incompatible. That's why you have weak leaders like Tim Walz, who might have been able to get by in the 1970s, is being systematically exploited today.
And you broke this story before the New York Times, so we have to give Chris Rufo credit. I mean, you have been breaking a lot of stories before the Times. It seems like a pattern. So keep up the great work, Chris. We really appreciate it. Good job.
Thank you.